Welcome to the Audio Description Narrators of America Know Your Narrator series. Today we have a very special bonus episode where we talk to people who are involved in the audio description world as consumers and also as advocates. Today we have a very special guest, Chris Danielsen, who works at the National Federation of the Blind, an avid audio description consumer. Thanks for joining us, Christopher.
Glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Let's jump right in. I'd love to ask you what you love about audio description.
Audio description just really allows blind people to have a level of enjoyment of movies, television programs that we just haven't been able to have in the past. It's not that we didn't consume movies and television before, but there was always a gap in our perception of those things. And sometimes that gap could be filled somewhat by watching with a friend or watching with family, but it never really filled the gap because the friend or family member that you were watching with, if you were fortunate to be able to do that, was also trying to figure out what was going on. And so by the time they were able to explain to you what was happening, when they had figured it out, you were already missing the nuance and you weren't really experiencing the program and learning what was happening in the program in the same way. Because the tendency of people that are sitting with you and watching something is to try to figure it out themselves before they try to explain it to you. And what audio description really does is it gives you that real-time feedback of, look, this is what we're seeing. We're not going to try to tell you what it means in terms of the story or any of that. We're just going to tell you what we're seeing. And that way you're experiencing as a blind person roughly equivalent to what a sighted person is experiencing. Obviously, it's not exactly the same, but it's closer than we've ever been before. And it allows us to just sit back and enjoy a program either with others or on our own without having to worry about the mediation of that experience, without that gap in perception, I guess, is what I really think. And what that allows us to do also is not only enjoy the program for ourselves, but participate in conversations about it with others in a way that we haven't been able to before, because there's no gap in our understanding of what happened, or because programs are increasingly visual and it's very possible to miss a significant plot development these days when you don't have audio description. And rather than being at the water cooler the next day and having to ask somebody what happened or what the significant development was, we have experienced it along with everybody else. So that was a long-winded answer, but I really think those are the things that I get from audio description.
One of the things that comes out so clearly is that, as you said, the participating in the conversations, that by removing that gap, that brings a form of inclusion that helps not just our blind audiences, but also the connections that our blind audiences have with others.
Actually, yeah, absolutely. In the National Federation of the Blind, the organization I work for and belong to, we talk a lot about the full integration of blind people into society. And that covers a lot of things. It covers equal opportunities in employment and education and all that, for example. But it also covers just being able to participate in life as it is lived by everybody. And that includes the cultural discussions and the conversations we can have around our favorite television programs, movies, which are critical cultural artifacts of our day and which are the basis of so many of our conversations. And so now we have a way to participate in those discussions that we didn't have before, because we're experiencing these cultural artifacts more fully than we have been.
If you could talk a little bit about the experience of audio description as an audience member, what are your expectations for being able to fully experience a movie or a TV show?
I mentioned this before. What I really love about audio description is that I'm coming as close as possible to experiencing the movie or the television show as it is, sort of in real time, not as mediated by somebody who figures out what is going on. So a lot of times when I would experience a movie or television show with a friend or family member, the discussion was limited to what happened. In other words, what's the plot development that has occurred on screen that I need to understand? And that's important, but it's limited. And, films are works of art and television shows are works of art. And the way that they reveal things is part of that artwork. And so like I said before, what I expect and what I really seek from good audio description is a sense of what a viewer of the program is actually seeing. Each nuance of the actions that are being taken without any spoilers, without any undue interpretation of what's happening, just a direct description of what's going on so that I can experience the revelations that the particular movie or program has to offer in the same way or roughly in the same way that other people do. For example, it's very important that when a character is introduced and they're not identified by name yet, that the describer doesn't necessarily identify them by name and allows me to understand what their characteristics are and what they're doing even before I learn who they are. I think that's really important. There's a difference between having explained to you what you're actually seeing and just having somebody convey to you their understanding of what it means or what the events actually are. I just started watching because I was waiting for it to get audio description, and I just started watching Breaking Bad, very popular television show. And in the opening scenes of the first episode, you don't know who these people are. You don't know why what is happening is happening. And that's revealed in the course of the first episode. But what you see immediately is this very dramatic scene, and people who are familiar with the show will understand that. And you're trying to ask yourself what is going on here. That's something that audio description allows because it describes what's being presented, not interpreting what's being presented. And that, I think, is the real quality differential with really good audio description.
It's great to hear you use the words good and quality when it comes to audio description, that it does seem like the conversations that are happening about audio description, because there's so much more of it, whether it's the streaming services, broadcast channels, or films that you download or buy or eventually go to the theater to. Is your palette evolving as far as good? I mean, do you have like really sophisticated taste now for, this is good audio description, or, this is going to be a long haul. I'm going to have a tough time getting through this.
Yeah, I think that's true, Roy. And like you said, because there's so much more of it now. Before, you were just grateful for whatever you could get. And now there's so much audio description available that it does start to make a difference to you as to the quality of it. And we probably all have different ideas about quality, but at the same time, there are some definite principles that emerge. I feel like, you can definitely tell differences in how audio description is handled, and you can make decisions about, okay, I really like this, or I like this approach, or I don't like this approach. I like this narrator, not as crazy about this other narrator. It does allow you to have a more refined sense of what you want in audio description and to have a conversation about that. Because, I mean, one of the great things about the work that you're doing is really including the consumers of audio description in the discussion of what it would be like, because I think that's what's been missing before, as happens with a lot of services that are provided to blind people. People think, oh, we're doing such a great thing by providing this service, and then that's the end of the discussion. There actually needs to be a discussion always from the perspective of the blind people who are receiving the service or the input. Is that really benefiting me? And how is it benefiting me? And what makes it better and what makes it not as good? So the ability to have that discussion now is also really exciting. And it means that we're participating in a process that improves the experience, hopefully, for everybody.
Absolutely. And that discussion, like you said, that the consumers are influencing, I can say personally, my read as a narrator has changed and evolved and grown. And it's because I'm listening to what our audience wants, as well as other narrators. This isn't just limited to me, it's across the board. And I'm curious if we could use that discussion that you're talking about to share maybe some examples of how, whether it's employment of blind experts within the world of audio description, or maybe some steps that audiences that listen to audio description can take that can help, basically speak up and keep that discussion going.
Well, I think there are opportunities there. I mean, there are already people like yourself who are actively soliciting that feedback. And I'd really like to see the companies that are producing audio description to formalize processes for receiving feedback from the consumers. Too often it's very difficult to know who did the audio description and all of the things you would need to know in order to give constructive feedback. Thankfully, that's becoming easier. I commend, for example, Netflix for listening to consumer feedback, and instead of prohibiting describers from saying who they were, what companies they were involved with at least, and who actually wrote and narrated the audio description, to actually including that information, because that gives us a way into having those discussions. Now, I think what remains to be seen is how open some of the entities are to that feedback. And I'm not just talking about individuals like yourself. And obviously, when you receive feedback, it has an influence on who you're working with, because you're bringing that experience to it. But I really hope that there is room for more formalized processes, and even down to, as you say, employment, hiring blind people to work in the creation of the description. Obviously, the way that we do that would be different from the way that a sighted person does it, and it may not be in the same the same part of the process for because obviously we're not going to be the people probably watching the program in the first instance and writing down the initial description. But I think there can be a process where blind people can experience the program and with the, maybe the first draft of the description, and then say, okay, these are the questions I had. These are the ways that it can be improved. This is the information that you included too soon or too late. All of those things can go into improving the experience. And obviously, it shouldn't be just feedback from one blind person for each piece, ideally. Obviously, how that works has to be worked out, because a lot of times there's a time crunch and all of that. And that's another piece that can be improved, because if the industry starts incorporating the creation of audio description earlier in the process of developing a finished product, that would be really helpful too. But as we can, let's have those discussions early so that the final audio described product comes out to be the best that it really can.
And it sounds like with those opportunities, for our blind audiences to get paid for their valuable expertise, that also contributes to the excellence of the audio description quality. That's a win-win, that everybody wins from that.
Absolutely. It would also tally with the lifelong goal of many of us to get paid to watch TV shows and movies. That would be awesome. I mean, I love the job that I have, I have to say, but what a cool thing to be. I've always envied like the TV and movie critics. I'm like, wow, you get paid to do that?
Sure. Well, that's curious. Are there any examples from your work, maybe in a different industry, that had a success that could be similar to what we're talking about in audio description here?
I think generally in accessibility, what the National Federation of the Blind has always emphasized is you can create the best user experience that you think possible from an engineering and coding and design perspective. But you really don't know whether you've been successful until you see how the end user, the blind person, reacts to it. And so really in everything, and we've been successful with this in accessibility, really saying to those who are trying to create accessible websites and accessible apps, let us test the product, let us pound on it and try to break it and find all of the potential issues that users are going to have. And in the end, you're going to have a better product for that. And we've seen that happen in accessibility. You can tell, it's pretty easy to tell when a designer of a website has taken user experience into account, as opposed to when they've just checked all the technical boxes that make for accessibility. For example, little things like whether a website uses headings effectively, not just as a design element, but in order to actually organize the information on a web page so that it's easy to find what you need. And by the way, that helps everybody. It doesn't just help blind people. What we're learning is that audio description helps everybody. It is increasingly popular, slowly but surely, with commuters and with other people who can't be looking at the screen of their device all the time. In the same way, we've found that when we work with companies to build accessible websites, accessible apps, those apps, the companies consistently tell us, wind up being better for everybody. So we've definitely seen that our input can have a positive impact in various ways. And we certainly feel that it can be the same with audio description. Putting aside the fact that it's just important from a principle standpoint as well, the whole nothing about us without us principle. If you're going to provide something that is supposed to be of use to blind people, I mean, to us, it only makes sense that you include blind people in the creation of that piece. And that's what we really want to see. But more importantly, it benefits the product for that to happen.
And what a great analogy that the websites. I loved how you said about it's beyond just checking a box of accessibility, that what you're speaking about is, yeah, okay, so there's minimum standards here, but let's talk and figure out what's going on that can bring the best and bring the most quality here. And that you're getting feedback from companies. They don't just move on. They're actually reaching back and say, hey, this is better than we ever expected, that there's actual feedback beyond just the minimum requirement.
Right. And I think that that has real application in the world of audio description. There's so many things that could be done. I'd love to see, for example, just as an example, DVDs or programs with among the bonus content, there's a more expanded piece of the audio description. For example, what's done in live theater on Broadway now, some of the pre-recorded audio description that's being used for that actually starts before the play actually starts, 10 or 15 minutes before the play actually starts, and describes the set and describes each character and what kind of costumes they tend to wear, how their actions are presented. I went to see To Kill a Mockingbird on Broadway, and they explained that So in the Broadway version of To Kill a Mockingbird, the children are played by adults, and they're both narrating the story and participating in it. And they're able to move more freely when they're in the past than they are when they're narrating. And so their actions are dictated by what role they're playing in the story at any particular time. And that was explained in sort of the pre-description. And, right now with TV and movies, the audio description is great, but the audio description only has so much time to fit in between the dialogue and the other sound elements. And so there's not time for necessarily a full description of the costumes, the set, the background details that also make up the experience. So I'd love to see more of that included in audio description, even if it has to be outside the experience of actually watching the thing, and almost a bonus feature that takes 10 or 15 minutes to say, okay, this is what everyone looks like. This is the kind of color template that's used for the show. All of those things I would love to see more of. Now, I mean, there are probably other blind people listening to this who are like, I don't care about any of that stuff. Well, that may be true, or maybe you don't care about it because you've never had a chance to be exposed to it before. I usually find that the more someone can tell me about a piece, the more I appreciate it, the more it enriches the experience.
The technology allows that kind of bonus thing. Chris, we're literally in a bonus episode of the Know Your Narrator series where this is getting too meta.
Yeah, I know. That's crazy.
We've got the freedom here on a podcast to be able to talk, more in depth about a lot of things that are kind of glossed over when it comes to audio description. And your analogy here with the expanded bonus feature that, whether it's an extra thing that you can download or, like you said, include it on a DVD or wherever it is, that it allows for the audio description to close that gap even further instead of just being limited to the 20 seconds in between two lines of dialogue.
Right. I mean, props to audio describers. They do the best they can with the limited time that they have. And I'm sometimes amazed by how much detail they are able to get in. And of course, part of the reason that audio description is so important now, I would argue it's becoming more and more critical because increasingly in movies and television, there are long stretches where there is no dialogue. And we're just experiencing the visuals. We're just experiencing the scenery. We're going through the process of what a character is thinking in different ways. Going back to Breaking Bad, because that's a current experience I'm having, there's a scene where the main character is just sitting at a desk writing and making a list of pros and cons of taking a particular action that a blind person would have completely missed without the audio description. So obviously the more space there is, the less dialogue there is, the more space there is to fill in those details. But even in a dialogue dense project, there's room for understanding the costumes, particularly if it's a period piece of some kind. There's all kinds of artistic decisions that directors make that go into how a piece is presented. And the more information that you can get from the audio description, the more you understand the piece and what the director is trying to do. Again, it goes beyond a what's happening piece to a here's what this whole experience is like. That's really special when it can happen, because I really enjoy understanding those artistic decisions and understanding the artistic presentation, because otherwise I might as well just listen to something, like an audiobook. If I don't understand something about the visual language of a program, then what's the point in experiencing the story that way as opposed to experiencing it another way?
Mm-hmm. And from that example of the expanded bonus features, let's call it, to how other advocacy efforts within the worlds of websites can parallel audio description. And you even mentioned the formalizing feedback and how those could lead to opportunities for more employment of blind people. Are there some other things that you love to see audio description go based on where we are right now?
There's so much more audio description available, but there are so many things that we don't experience as blind people. We've been thinking about it a lot during this whole COVID-19 piece because there are so many graphics being presented to us on the news to explain how the virus works and what it looks like. Blind people, although we're getting the sound of the newscaster telling us certain things, we're not getting any of that. Obviously, it would be more of a challenge to include audio description in a news program. But at the same time, the other thing that we haven't gotten on always on the news, you watch a given news package, there's literally an interview with somebody, and who they are and the reason they're being interviewed, their area of expertise or whatever, are displayed on the screen. As a blind person, I have no idea who that is unless the narration of the package has happened to include that information, which it often doesn't. There are still so many places where audio description could be applied. Blind people often prefer to listen to sporting events on the radio as opposed to watching them on television because the television sportscasters are so engaged in commentary that they're not even bothering to describe the play-by-play. So there's another place where audio description could be helpful that it isn't being used right now. All of those scenarios would present challenges because obviously, what if you do care about the commentary? But audio description can be turned on and off, and there are probably other things that could be done. For example, I've talked to another friend about the fact that it would be really cool if you could send the audio description track to your Bluetooth earpiece while the television just plays the regular soundtrack. And that would have a couple of advantages. One, if your other members of your family, for example, happen to be annoyed or distracted by audio description, then you could consume it yourself. And the other is in one ear, you could get audio description, and in the other ear, you could get just the regular soundtrack, including play-by-play commentary, the regular newscast, whatever. So there are technological things that could be done to improve audio description too, and that would allow it to be integrated into more things.
What a great idea to combine the conversation of the technology and our audience's requests in such an elegant way. These are exciting times here.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much possibility, and not all of it is being explored. And even as we have more audio description than we've ever had before. And the weird thing about that, by the way, is it makes you only want more. Right? The more you have of something like this, the more you want of it. Because, at least for me, once you realize how much your experience is enhanced by audio description, it really, to me at this point, it almost becomes a deal breaker if a movie or program does not have audio description. If I want to see it bad enough, and depending on the format of it, I might watch it without audio description, but it is increasingly becoming where I'm almost indignant when I don't have access to audio description because it enhances the experience for me so much that when I don't have it, I'm like, okay, what am I missing here? Where's the piece that I'm not getting?
And it sounds like even when it does have it, there are certain benchmarks that are expected. You had mentioned before about the good audio description and what a difference that makes to your experience of the program or of the film, that the quality of the audio description, it's more than just does it have it or not. There's something else there that does mean something to you.
Right. I think that's absolutely right. I mean, it's inevitable that if a program has audio description at all, whether that audio description is good and helpful and listenable is going to contribute to whether a blind person enjoys the overall program. That doesn't mean that you can't get past audio description that is of lower quality, but why would you spend your time doing that when you can have a more quality experience watching another program? So that's something that I think the industry needs to become more aware of. One of the things we really want to see in the National Federation of the Blind is for the industry not to think of AD as something that's just bolted on, as a kind of post-production afterthought. Oh, we have to have this for the blind audience, but really something that's more integrated into the process where everybody's thinking about, all right, let's really make sure that this is quality so that blind people enjoy this experience as much as we want everybody else to be able to. Just as there's room for artistic expression in the visuals and in the musical score, there is room for artistic expression in audio description, and really drilling down and making sure that the audio description is the most thorough and accurate and quality description of the program that it can be. That's what we'd really love to see.
Thanks for your and the National Federation of the Blind's efforts towards those goals.
Well, and thank you for yours and all the other narrators that are becoming and audio describers that are becoming increasingly involved in our discussions and in our community, and getting on the audio description Facebook group and getting on social media and having dialogues like this one. I mean, we really appreciate that. And I have to give credit to you, Roy, because I feel like you are one of the people, if not the person, who really started that. And thank you for being so passionate about it, because I've said this to you before, and I've said this to other people. This could so easily have just been another voiceover gig for you. You've really come forward as an advocate and somebody who cares about the quality of it, and that means a lot. We just need to also see that from other players at other points in the process, including the industry itself, the actual producers and filmmakers. I think the more people get involved in the discussion, the better it will be for everyone.
Sounds like it's coming back to nothing about us without us yet again.
Absolutely.
Anything else that you'd like to share?
Gosh, you've kind of wrung me out. I'll probably think of 16 different things once we conclude the interview. But right now, I just think the overall message is how much this has enhanced the viewing experience for me, and the things we'd like to see going forward, I think is the main thing I want to get across. And let's all work together to make sure that this is something that continues to advance. Let's see more of it. There's more advocacy to be done. I am deeply disappointed that I am not hearing that HBO Max includes audio description, for example. So there's more work to be done in that area, but there's also more work to be done just in the advancing of quality. But those two things, those two discussions have to happen hand in hand, because while we have more audio description than we've ever had, there's still a lot of stuff out there that isn't described, places where it could be used that it isn't. So that's the other piece that needs to be thought about.
Where can we follow you on social media?
So I have a personal Twitter account that is R Lawyer. R stands for recovering. So you can find me there. I am also on Facebook. I'm not nearly as active on Facebook, but I am pretty active on Twitter, not as active as I used to be. Of course, you can also find the National Federation of the Blind at NFB_voice on Twitter and Instagram, and on Facebook as well. That's where you can reach out to me.
Thanks again for your time and for all your expertise. And this collaboration has been going so great, and it's really exciting to see where it's going to go. Thanks again, Chris.
You too, Roy. Thanks for all you do, and thanks for having me on the show.